Thank you, everybody, for coming to the College Football Betting with Aaron Torres YouTube channel. Before we get to the video that you came here for, if you could do me one quick favor, just click that subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow. I appreciate it more than you know. Also, if you want to, click the little bell notification so you know anytime any of our previews go live. We appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I know that Florida State hosting Miami took a little bit of a hit with Florida State losing last Friday night at Virginia. It is still a huge game with huge ramifications and huge implications. Miami on the road off of a bye is a 4.5-point favorite in the Circa Sportsbook. The over-under in this game set at 53.5. So let's go ahead and dive in. Again, all point spreads provided by Circa Sportsbook. If you're on that Kentucky-Tennessee border, the new sportsbook, Mint Kentucky Downs and Franklin, Kentucky. Let's dive in, and let me start by saying this. Listen, I know, like I just said a second ago, that this game lost a tiny little bit of luster after Florida State lost last weekend. But for college football fans of a certain age, like Florida State-Miami just means something. I remember when I was a kid, this was the game that you circled on your calendar every single year. I remember a couple years, it was the season opening game. Great teams, great programs, great players, future pros. Bunch of years, it was basically at high noon. I remember, side tangent. I remember there was one year I was playing high school football, and I think it was, I was maybe like a freshman, and I knew I wasn't going to play, and Florida State-Miami was going on at the same time as my game, and I wanted to be home and watching Florida State-Miami, not my crappy high school football team. That's neither here nor there, okay? But I bring it up because this is a huge game, huge rivalry, and listen, I think for the first time in a long time, ACC title implications for both teams. And you could certainly argue that's a super important game for both teams, starting with Florida State. Listen, with Florida State, I want to try and be fair to Florida State. Yes, that loss is really bad on Friday night. But I think also we can go back now 2, 3, 4 days after the fact with a little bit of revisionist history and really say that I think, in my opinion, Florida State lost that game because of two reasons specifically. And let's keep in mind, even in the loss, put up 38 points and well over 500 yards of total offense. Question is, why did they lose? How can we learn from it? First of all, uncharacteristic 3 turnovers in that game. They had 3 total turnovers through their first 3 games of the season, 1 against Bama, whatever. Well, fast forward, they had 3 turnovers, many of them at the worst possible time against Virginia. And then I do think the other thing that is worth noting, the defense just wasn't good enough. Defense against Virginia gives up 440 yards of total offense, over 200 yards rushing. Virginia, 7 of 13 on third down, 2 of 2 on fourth down. And it just felt like that Florida State defense could never get the stop that it needed. They gave up 5 touchdown drives during the game. I looked it up because I felt like I remembered it, and I remembered it correctly. Of the touchdown drives they gave up, again, 5 during regulation in that game, 3 of them were 6+ minutes. So just drives that just chewed up clock, kept that offense off the field. You got to be better. I think, listen, if there's a glasses half full thing, the offense did not miss a beat last week. 514 yards of total offense, 258 yards passing, 256 yards rushing on 48 attempts. And keep in mind, again, 3 drives that ended in turnovers. So you just take care of the ball a little bit better. You might be well over 600 yards against a pretty good Virginia team that is now ranked coming into this week. As far as Miami, been a couple weeks since we saw them. The last time we saw them, they were putting Billy Napier and the Florida Gators into a body bag, okay? So listen, Florida's bad. We're going to talk about them later with this Texas game coming up. But 2 things can be true. We can acknowledge that Florida stinks, that Billy Napier needs to go. Those are conversations for another segment at another time. What we can also acknowledge, Miami, best team that Mario Cristobal has had. I think you can argue most complete team we've seen in college football. Can run the ball, future NFL quarterback, great on defense, great on both lines. Doesn't mean they're unbeatable. But I think you can absolutely argue that Miami is the most complete team in college football right now. And I think in many ways it was on display in that Florida game because, you have an offense that a week before against a good South Florida team put up 49 points. You have an offense that against Notre Dame in week 1 put up close to 400 yards of total offense. And you had an offense against Florida that really struggled, in part because for all of Florida's faults offensively, defensively, they're actually very, very, very good. And so what is impressive to me, would you have liked to see a better effort from Carson Beck? Absolutely. But conversely, the defense when you needed them was phenomenal. How about this? 141 yards allowed of total offense, 61 yards passing. I'm not great at math. That comes out to 2.5 yards per completion for the Florida Gators. Yeah, that's not going to get the job done. Again, some of it is on Billy Napier. A lot of it, though, is on that Miami defense, which just gets better and better and better as the weeks go on. Oh, by the way, in terms of that defense, 7 TFLs, 4 sacks in that game. And this is the stat. And again, I want to be fair. Some of it's on Florida, but a lot of it is on that Miami defense. Florida 0 for 13 on third downs. I don't care who you're playing. When you hold them to under 150 yards of total offense, under 3 yards per completion, 0 for 13 on third downs, that is a incredible defensive performance, and Miami deserves all the credit for the win against Florida State. Good news now, they're back. They're rested. Mario Cristobal this week talked all about, the time off, how much it was needed, this and that. As Miami now gets into a stretch where they're going to be in the heart of ACC play, and we'll see what happens from here. All right, so that is kind of where both of these teams are at. By the way, I hate the ACC schedule. Miami off of a bye plays this game and then goes on another bye. Whoever's doing schedules in the ACC offices is a train wreck. Another conversation for another day. Let's dive in. Miami, a 4.5-point favorite in this game. I'll be real. I actually do like Florida State plus 4.5 to cover and probably, frankly, win outright, maybe win outright. But I think 4.5 for Florida State at home is too many points. I like Florida State. Question is, why? I think there are a few things why. First of all, this is Miami's first road game of the season. I understand that, you don't want to, put too much into road versus home. Oregon just won at Penn State. Alabama just won at Georgia. But I do think there is something to the fact that, by the way, both of those teams had already played road games earlier this season, but Miami gets 4 straight games at Hard Rock Stadium. Now they have to go to Tallahassee, where things are going to be bananas. Okay. Ticket price, get-in price is like over $300. By the way, if you use promo code Torres at SeatGeek, you will get $20 off your first purchase. We'll save that conversation for later. But I just bring it up because the environment's going to be crazy. Night game. I know game day isn't technically there, but it's going to be that game day type environment. Miami, by the way, it's worth noting, I know the defense is improved, but last year their 2 losses were on the road. 2 other road games late in the season, they gave up 35 plus points. So I just think there's something to be said about going on the road for the first time now in the first weekend of October. And I think as far as Florida State is concerned, I think there's something to be said about understanding what we just saw, but not overreacting to that. And that's one thing in all of these previews that I try to do is not overreact to the last thing that we just saw. And so why I bring that up, yes, it was bad for Florida State against Virginia. I'm not going to deny that. But as I said, offensively, they did not miss a beat. 500 yards of total offense, about 250 yards apiece of rushing and pass offense. And what's important about that is that, again, it would have been more if there weren't 3 drives that stopped because of turnovers. I think beyond that with the defense, again, you don't want to overreact or underreact to the last thing you just saw. But here's the other thing about Florida State. I know the perception is, well, we just saw them against Virginia, field storm, they stink, whatever. Well, here's the counterpoint to that. Statistically, Florida State still has been pretty good defensively outside of that game on Saturday. And let's not forget, if we're going to overreact or if we're not going to overreact to Virginia, let's also remember it was a month ago that this defense was phenomenal against Alabama. You go back to that game, and again, it's one game swinging one way or the other, really bad against Virginia. But conversely, against Alabama at home, take out the first drive. They held Alabama to 10 points, under 100 yards rushing, and also on top of it, 7 TFLs, 3 sacks. And so am I saying that they're going to dominate? No. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is Miami is great on both lines, but I think Florida State will be able to run the ball. They have so much misdirection. I don't care how much you prep for it, whatever. It's also another thing to do it on the road. And I don't think that Florida State's defense is quite as bad as it looks. So the fact that Florida State is at home gives me confidence. I will take Florida State plus the 4.5. And I think it's a game that, frankly, they can and just might win outright on Saturday night. And if they do, it'll certainly make the ACC title chase very interesting.